Welcome everybody to another episode of the Spehar Initiative. It's been a while since I released an episode. I have been dealing with some stuff. For many of you, you are aware that I've been in Florida for 6 months of the wintertime, and I've been home for about a month and a half now, and I've been dealing with some stuff. I ended up getting COVID, and I got another head cold after that. But I don't like to think of it as sicknesses. I like to think
big
of
upgrades,
more as upgrades.
Yeah.
So now that I'm back, you might see me cough a little bit. That means I have a little tickle in my throat, but it's okay. It's been a while, but I'm back now, and I have a special guest with me here today.
Hey,
This is a doozy of an episode. You're probably wondering who that guy is. Well, you're going to hear all about his story, and in the Techno Tutor circle, we have a name for him, and his name is Mahyar Millionaire. Mahyar, welcome to the episode, my friend. How you doing?
good. Did you say mayor billionaire or millionaire? I couldn't
I said millionaire. That. I should have upgraded that to billionaire.
Yeah.
It was the MM.
Yeah, but, yeah. Because it's funny because we were going for millionaire, but I'm like, come on, I'm 23. Already close to it. Let's just aim for the billionaire, never know, maybe go for trillionaire, Exactly. But no, bro, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. We've been wanting to do this for a while, and now the timing, everything is working, right? And you got your upgrade, so I get to speak with the upgraded version. Hell yeah.
That's it. Yeah, Mahyar and myself, we've had this thing scheduled for weeks, but we had to keep pushing it due to business and illnesses. But we're here now, and Mahyar has a story that I feel that everybody must hear, because his upbringing and where he's come from and to where he is now is something that you can write a book about, essentially, and no word of a lie. So before we get into the deep stuff, Mahyar, I just want to ask you, you're in the big state of Texas, Houston, be more exact. How has the Lone Star State been treating you?
Good, very good. Something I like about this city is, doesn't matter if economy is crashing, doesn't matter what's going on, it's like very stable, right? But I guess no matter where you are, based on, what you participating most on, because what you focus on, you just see more of that. So I guess that depends on that. But for me, I mean, during COVID, what was it, 2020, that the whole thing started, April, August, somewhere around there, where people were losing their jobs, going into fear, buying toilet paper for I don't know what reason. And it was during that time that everything actually started working for me. And I started making more money and providing jobs for people. I actually met many cool people through providing jobs for other people. So it's all about, how you look at it and stuff. And I know we'll go more into my story, like where I come from, all that. But yeah, Houston's very good place to, visit and so forth. So yeah.
I've been to Texas once, and that was for the big TT event. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But I know everything is bigger in Texas, which is great. I'm a big guy. So it just suits me well.
Exactly.
But one thing I got to touch on right away. You recently got a new car.
Yes.
Can you tell me and everybody out there which one it is? Okay,
sure.
hang on. I know what it is, but I want everybody else to know what it is.
Okay. Do you want to know what I had before that and then what I had now?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first car that I had was a Honda, like a 2001 Honda CRV, which my dad left behind because he moved to Los Angeles, and he left me that. It was like, not so great car. Every time I turned it on, I didn't know when it was gonna explode. Like the sound it made, I was like, am I gonna make it today? But then at the age of, so again, we went through the COVID, and it was during that time that I was able to make, like, I had days where I made like 8,000 in a day, and then 10,000 in a week, and at some point I think 24,000 in a week and so forth. And I was like, all right, maybe I should get another car. And so I bought, I think, was a 2050 Mercedes C300, right? It was like wide on wide, and, pretty nice car. But now recently, so that was the age of 21, 22. And now I'm 23, and now I bought the 2022 Tesla Model S, right? Which is like around, what was it, 110,000 or so, right? Give or take. And you know, it's a really fast car and nice car, you know, so you know.
You say it
Yeah,
so subtly. Yeah, it's a nice car. It's not bad.
it's okay.
You know how many people at your age would like have these kind of dreams of owning a Tesla. You know, Tesla's
Yeah,
it's huge, especially amongst, you know, like, okay, I'm older, so I'm 45 years old, right? So I'm
okay,
gonna refer to you as the younger generation, okay?
sounds
So the
good.
younger generation, what they would give to own a Tesla. So I applaud you
Yeah.
for that, and it's awesome that you have that. Next time when I come to Houston, I expect a little bit of a scoot around the city.
Oh, for sure.
Think of it
Yeah,
as the
for sure.
Autobahn. Just let her rip. Okay.
Exactly. You know what's funny, Rob? Real quick, it's like uh I've talked to, like, talking about young people wanting that. It's like I've talked to at least 5 to like 10 people that, you know, I was talking with them and they had seen like videos of me. I posted it on my YouTube and everything. And they were like, man, like, one reason I wanted to get in touch with you is because the car that you have, it's like right now is on my dream board, and it's like you have it in real life, you know. and and so, because like one of the reasons I bought the Tesla wasn't even for me necessarily, it was to allow other people to actually drive it and see what it feels like, because you can't even test drive that car right now, right? And if you buy, I don't know, any Tesla, it's like you have to wait until 2023, right? So one of the reasons I get most of the things I get is to let other people experience it, because I wish I had been able to experience that stuff, and I was able to experience some of it. You know, I was going to the mall every weekend and stuff like that. But many people, especially nowadays, it's like you can't test drive so many things like that, or wearing even nice watches and stuff, right? I remember going to the Rolex store with like a, you know, old t-shirt and old shorts, and the guard looking at me like, what are you doing here, you know? And
Yeah.
like I'm out there like, hey, I'm, you know, I'm just looking around, you know. And they're like, come on, who are you kidding? But you know, they're pretty cool. So, you know, being able to get some of that stuff is cool, because it's like other people can experience and be like, oh, it's, if it's possible for Mayor, it's definitely possible for me, you know what I mean?
So quickly, I know anybody listening to this will not be able to see it, but for those who are watching this right now, Mayor, what time is it? Can you show everybody what time it is?
What time? Hold on, I don't know, can you, I don't know if you can see, almost one.
Yeah. Boom. The dude's got a Rolex on his sitting on his wrist. Like
Yeah.
awesome. Like awesome. And it's important to note your story, Mary. And I want you to take as long as you want to tell your story about, you know, how far you've come as a person and where you began and how you can compare that to where you are now. I know you've already talked about that already a little bit, but you can always add to that as well. And I say this to everybody. I love me a good origin story.
Hmm.
So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yours.
For sure. And any place, if you want to ask more questions, obviously feel free, right? Because I could just talk for hours. So
It's
so
all good
yeah,
stuff
so
though. It's all good stuff.
yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun episode. So we'll make it worth it. So I was born originally in Iran, in the capital called Tehran in Iran. And I was raised until I was about 14 or so. And then it was like towards the end of eighth grade. I remember I had like 2 weeks left to like take the last finals, to be able to be done with middle school. But 2 weeks left of school, you know, we got a response from my aunt, because she was the one that was like sponsoring us to move to America. And we had been waiting for like 2+ years. And then 2 weeks before we finished school, they told us, oh, you got the answer. And so you're going to Austria, to Vienna, to stay there about a couple months and then go to America. And you're leaving in like a month or so, right? And I remember we got that news at like 11 at night or something like that. And I was like so excited that I could not sleep, right? And I got so excited that I was like, you know, I don't want to go to school anymore. Like, I'm done with that. You know, I don't even want to finish it, you know? Like, I really, you know, hated or disliked the education system, you know, how it was designed. Um, and you know, coming here to America, we'll touch on it later, like the education system. But
Yep.
over there, I mean, in Iran, you know, they straight up beat up kids, like with rulers, with fists, with like slap, like anything they can get their hands on, like they hit the kid. Like if you make fun of the teacher, they take you outside, they like slap you, and it's like it's so loud that every class like hears the noise, you know. And it's like, imagine what that's doing to the child, especially in like the early ages of development, all that stuff, you know. And so yeah, I mean, growing in Iran wasn't the most pleasant experience, you know. Like we weren't super poor, but we weren't super rich. It was like once in a while going to a restaurant, right? Like we couldn't afford it. Or like I wanted to get a computer and my dad had to save like a year or two of his saving to just buy like a regular computer, you know, not even top of the line. And so I remember coming to America, and we got here. So we stayed in Vienna about, 9, 10 months or so. And then by the time we came here, I was like 15. And I kid you not, I didn't even remember the first 14 years of my life because of how depressed I was and like how much I hated life, you know? And I had like no purpose. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought the only two jobs that existed were like being a doctor and engineer because everyone just talked about that. And it didn't even occur to me of like, oh, what about the people who work in grocery store? What about people who are selling television? Like I didn't even see those things as job opportunities, you know? Like that's how limited my vocabulary was. And I grew up with no internet and stuff. You know, my cousin had internet. So once in a while I would go and like he would go on Facebook and I'm like, oh, what is this? You know, or like go on YouTube and I'm like, oh, you could listen to any song. I thought that's what YouTube was, like just a place you could listen to song. You know, I didn't even know there was like so many videos on there.
The world, yeah.
Exactly. And so that's how I grew up. And so imagine taking that kid, right? Bring him to Houston, and it's like a very well diverse, like so many cultures here and stuff. I remember when I came here, like seeing like a black person for the first time, right? And my mind was like, oh, I thought black people were in like Africa. Like, what's going on? Like, that's how limited my vocabulary was. I thought like, oh, black people were in Africa, Mexicans were in Mexico, Persians were in Iran, you know, like that's how I was thinking about it, you know, like I had no education, like not a high education, right? So
Right.
that's like a little bit of that upbringing. And yeah, and fast forward coming to here to America, I remember wanting to go to school, right? And it's like I had so much resistance because originally I didn't like school, and now I had to go to a school that was in a language I didn't even understand. And what's funny is I took English classes in Iran since I was 3 years old, right? Up until like sixth, seventh grade. But as soon as I came here, all of that went out the window. Like all I remembered was like me no English. Like, that's the only thing I knew. It's like I was so nervous that everything else just went away. Because we know like the way education and everything works, even when you buy a course or read books or whatever, you're just memorizing things, right? And it's like, how many things can you memorize? I still haven't met that many people who memorize 3 phone numbers. Like most people don't even remember their mom's phone number or their dad's or uncle. So it's like, then how are you gonna remember all that stuff? You know what I mean? So yeah, so coming here, going to school, I remember we went to ninth grade because we're like, all right, well, we're done with eighth grade, right? We go to ninth grade, and I remember the school was massive, like we enter and we're like, what is this? Like, where do we go? Like, where's the map? Like the size of even the middle school here was like the size of elementary, middle school, and high school combined, and 2 times bigger than that, like of what I was used to in Iran.
Right.
The school, like the schoolyard was literally the size of the apartment complex I have right now. Like that's how small it was. And so I remember going to and my cousin came with us because he knew how to speak and all that stuff. Like my aunt, they've been in the US like about 10 years when we came. And now it's like we came in September of 2013. So now it's almost 10 years that we've been here, which is interesting. And so I remember going to the administrator and whatnot. And my mom was talking to them to, enroll me in the school and all that. And I remember one of the things they require is like, your vaccination sheet and all that stuff to make sure you've gotten all that. And so my mom hands them that thing, because she had it like translated from Persian to American, like I think I had taken like 30 shots like in Iran, And so she had translated all that. And she handed it to the person, and she looked at it. And then after a couple of seconds, she looked at my mom with like this confused face, right? And then we were like, what's wrong? And she was like, like, is this real? This paper? And we were like, yeah, what do you mean? And she was like, ma'am, like, what day is your son born again? And she was like, well, April of 18 of 1999. And she said, well, here it says your son has received his shots on the 14th. So like 4 days before he was born. Like, how is that possible? So they thought like we had like faked the documents or whatnot. And so the guy in Iran that translated it, he put that I got my vaccine shots like few days before I was even born,
Yeah.
right? So they were like, ma'am, like we need up to date like vaccination or your son cannot enroll. So they took me, and I hated like needles, and like, I would just pass out, like I would faint. Even if you had like we went to a hospital and you had like a band-aid on, and I knew that something had entered your arm, just looking
Okay.
at the band-aid, I would just like, just fall over. But they took me to the it wasn't even a hospital, it was like where they took the refugees, and it like smelled terrible, and it was like so dirty, the whole place. And they took me, and I remember the fear in my body, right? I was like terrified. And I remember the nurse coming in, and legit, she like, her hands were like this. You know how you go to a restaurant and you have a lot of people, and like the server, like they have two like big ass like plates and
Yep.
all that,
Yep.
right? The nurse came in with two trays, and in each like metal tray was like around 12 to 13 vaccine in each one.
Wow.
And they were gonna give me all of that same day. And at first, like, she started injecting one by one, and then she was like, this is gonna take a while. So then she started injecting two at a time. Like, she had two vaccine on her hand, two at the time. And she wasn't even doing it right. Like, she was standing up, so she was like doing it at an angle. So at some point my arm like started bleeding and stuff. And I think at some point like I passed out. I was like, this is too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, that's
And it's like, looking at it now, it's like that's the highest level of use, and no one's doing anything. And so yeah, they gave me like 20 something more, 30 something more shots. And then we went back to the high school, and then they were like, oh, by the way, here it says that your son didn't finish middle school, so you have to take 8th grade again to be able to go to the 9th grade. And then we're like, are you kidding me? So it's like, I wanted to be done with school, and now I had to take an additional year.
yeah.
you know but looking at it, it was like good, because it's like middle school gave me more time to learn English by the time I went to high school and all that. But what was funny is like I went to 8th grade, and I didn't know what addition was. Like, I didn't know any of those words. But when I had to write things like math and, I don't know, some science things, it was like super easy. The things they were teaching here in middle school and even high school by the age of like 12th grade was things that we learned in like elementary school back in Iran, right? And here they didn't even teach like how to do, what is it, like radicals or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And how to like do all that by hand. Here they do everything with a calculator. In Iran, if they found out you had a calculator, it's like you would be punished, right? And some kids tried to be smart and had like those watches that had like a calculator,
Later on.
but
Oh,
even that they would take it away. You know what I mean? And so we had to do everything by hand
yeah.
or in our mind and all that, right? And so it's like I could easily see from outside perspective of like how they're just dumbing down the population of like the on the test. It's like, what is like 10 plus 13, and the kid would pull up a calculator for that. I'm like, what are you doing? Just add the ones, and like, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and what's funny is like, even though it was so simple, everyone's grades were not that great. And for me, because the whole thing was like so easy, I would get 100 in like all the classes. And so in the look of the other kids, it's like there's this kid that came from another country that can't even speak. And I was like super shy. I couldn't even say hi to anyone. And this kid is all of a sudden like the top of the class. He's being recognized by the teachers. And so at some point, then I started getting bullied. Like, I had kids in the class throw things at me, or in the hallway, like bump shoulders, or like, like physically like bully me in whatever way, or like verbally, and all that stuff. So I was like, well, this is like hell. I was like, I thought America was great. Like, what is this? And And I remember at some point, I started. My mom was always into like positive thinking and like meditation and law of attraction, like all that stuff. But she would never apply it herself. She was like a great student, as in like she had a high learning ability, like she was
Yep.
willing to learn, but she wasn't willing to apply it. She couldn't apply it, right? And my mom, someone who went through war, like literally her going to middle school was like she had to run from school to home, and in the meanwhile there was like bombs being dropped or like shots being fired and all that. And so all of that traumatized, like my mom didn't even remember like 40 years of her life, right? And she had to use Technotutor to now remember most of those memories, right? And so so not only I benefited from TT but my mom, right? But we'll get into all that later. But so long story short, in school, my mom, one day I was like crying. I would go to school super stressed, like I couldn't even sleep at night, super straight. I would like be shaking in the school, right? Like that's how much stress I had. And my teeth would be hitting each other, and like I'm like looking around like what's gonna happen to me today, and I remember, and then I would come back from school and I would just cry until I would fall asleep. So I would cry for like 3-4 hours until I fell asleep, and I couldn't eat anything. Like, so it's like I had become like really skinny. Like I was like a bone, like bones were sticking out of my chest. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
And so I remember my mom always kept saying, no, keep going. Like it'll get easier as soon as you learn English, and like it will become easier and so forth. And then I remember one time my mom would always tell me like, just say to yourself, like everything's gonna work out, everything's gonna be perfect. Like just say it, like what's the worst case? And so she was like, just tell yourself like everything's gonna be good today, like everything's gonna go the best way. And just do that for 2 weeks. And if it doesn't work out, then do whatever you're doing. Like it's not working out anyway, so at least try this. And I remember saying to myself, like everything works out. I don't know how, but everything's gonna get better. And I kid you not, within like a week and a half, the first few days, I'm like, Mom, it's not working. And what's funny is like in every single class, I would ask the teacher to use their telephone to call my mom. And I would like cry. I was like, Mom, get me out. I don't want to be here. I hate this. And she would keep telling me to keep going. And then some kids would like make fun of me. They were like, are you running a business or something? Like, why are you on the phone all the time? And all that stuff. And so it was really tough. And so at some point, around like a week and a half of me just telling myself like everything's gonna work out, like I don't know how, like let me just think positive in whatever shape, like just let me lie to myself. And after a week and a half, it's like those some of those kids that were bullied, like were bullying me, all of a sudden they just disappeared. And then after a few days on the school, like they have put up papers of like, if you see these kids, let us know. And I was like, what's happening? And then some other kids that were bullying me, all of a sudden they became like really good friends. Like they became really nice to me. They were smiling at me. They started teaching me things. And I'm like, what's going on? Like what's going on here? And and then I remember there were some classes where the kids were like afraid of those teachers, those teachers that the kids are like, oh, don't take that class. Like
Yeah.
you're screwed if you take that class. And I'm like, well, let me take that class. Let me see how bad is it. And what's funny is the teachers, like to everyone else, they were like assholes, and they would like, not be nice with the kids. But I realized the kids weren't nice to the teachers, so obviously it would work out. But those teachers were like the nicest people to me. Like I had this computer class, and the teacher was like this big black guy that like played football, like huge dude, and everyone was like terrified of him. On the day of the finals, instead of having me take the final, the guy brought his Xbox, and me and him were playing, I think, Dead Space or some game, while everyone else were taking their finals, you know? And I think at the end of the school year, like I ended up getting like 2-3 awards from like the principal, from 2 of the teachers. And to me, I was like, holy shit, it's like I just started seeing life as like a game of like, just by telling myself positive things, like things are working out. But then what was funny is when other people were saying positive things, it wasn't working for them. Like their life was still miserable. So I'm like, why is it that it's working for me and not working for anyone else, right? And so that's like kind of like the first chapter, right? And then we go to like gin and all that stuff. But so far, do you have any questions, anything, Rob?
Nope, not right now. I'm just curious. You touched on Technotutor,
Hmm.
and you started using that. When like did you start using it while you were still in school?
No, I used it, I think. So I graduated school when I was like 18, and then I found out about Technoter when I was 19.
Okay. Who
Yeah.
got you into that? Like how did you come across it?
Yeah, so fast forwarding, I kept doing the positive affirmation and whatnot. And then I started listening to self-development audios, motivational audios, like everything that I could find, right? I was listening like every day. And at that time I used to walk from school to home, and I used to walk about like 50 minutes every day, right? Didn't matter if it was raining. Some days I would come home and my shoes were like full of water, you know? And so it didn't matter the weather. I would like be walking, and the whole time I would just listen to positive things because how miserable my life was. And so at some point, I came across the movie The Secret, right? And I remember I didn't even know that Secret was available like um, on Netflix, right? And what's funny is now Netflix even took that down. You can't find Secret on the Netflix anymore. But at some point, the full documentary was there. Now it's like you have to go to some other websites to find it. But for me, I found like the YouTube version, which was like way watered down. The quality was not so good. You can't even tell who's who, right? But I remember listening to that, and the first time I heard of like you could create the life that you want, that like resonated with me in the sense of, well, I hate my life, and I hate that character that everyone had built me up to be, right? Like this super shy kid, didn't know how to speak, had the lowest self-esteem. My kids in my class, most of them didn't even know I existed. They didn't even know I was in that class. Like when a teacher would call my name, they would look around of like, there's a Mahyar in this class, right? And I was like, I've been here 2 years, you know? And and for me, like there was a point where, you know, many people get stuck within the point of, let me just think about what I want. For me, I would think about it, but I would take immediate action. Like my level of taking action is like massive. Like I listen something, if I like it, I just take action. I don't even think about consequence. I'm like, I'll deal with the consequence later, you know? Like it can't be worse than what I am. Like the thing that always kept me going was like, the worst case is I'll become homeless. And it's like, even if I become homeless here, my life is going to be better than what I was in Iran. So it's like that fear wasn't within me. So it's like I would just try everything, right?
Right.
Spend money, buy courses, whatever. So fast forward, I listened to The Secret, and within like a month, right? I remember one thing I wanted was like to become more known in the school, right? At first to learn more English, and my English started getting better. And then I was like, I want to be known. And then what happened in school, I ended up designing a video game with like one of the, because I was taking video game design and so forth. And I ended up designing a video game with this girl that, you know, she was into like anime and stuff. And she would just draw like anime characters, like all that stuff, like all she would do in the class, right? I'm pretty sure everyone has that one person that just like draws the whole class, right? And so I was like, hey, how about you design the characters and I'll write the code and I'll design like the code, you know? And so we ended up creating the game, and the teacher ended up liking it. And she introduced it to the principal and all that stuff. And then they ended up putting that game on the school laptop, like on the library, right? So
Right.
kids would go to the library and they would play the game. And so it's like we started getting recognized. And then, you know, in school here, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in classes, you have like a TV where they do like morning announcements and things like that. Do you guys have that over there or no?
Well, when I was back in school, it was just a PA system. It's a
Oh,
speaker on
okay.
the
Yeah.
wall. That's all it was.
Okay. I'm talking about recently, if you know. You know. No, so we had the PA system, obviously, but they also had TV for, I don't know, they had like a PowerPoint that would go through slides of like this event is coming up this weekend, homecoming's coming, and blah blah blah. And then one of the slides, they ended up putting a picture of me and this girl, and they were like, these are the people who like designed this game. And out of like 200 kids that were trying to design something, we ended up getting first place. And so our picture was on the TV for like 2 weeks. And so what happened is, like, when I would walk in the hallway, all of a sudden people were like, oh wait, are you the kid like that's on the TV? Or like, oh, are you this? And I was like, holy shit, this secret stuff works. So then I started telling everyone about, like, oh, you gotta watch The Secret, like it's real, it works. But then everyone started listening to it, and they wouldn't get any result. And they're like, what is this? Like, it must be a scam. Like, Mahyar, this doesn't work. Like, what are you talking about? And so this burning question was in my head of like, why is it that this is working for me, but it's not working for anyone else? And that question started repeating so much. And the way I got the answer to that question is I went to one of my cousin's birthday. Here I have about like 7-8 cousins here. And in Iran, I have like 20 something more. And one of the cousins' birthday, I remember there was this one cousin that for some reason, like, I just didn't like talking with him, right? Like, he was like, sometimes he would become spiteful, jealous, and so forth. And it's like, I would just avoid him at all costs, Like, he would text me, I would just avoid his text. And my aunt was like, hey, why don't you like answer his calls? I'm like, why is he being such a baby and telling you about it, And so, and I remember we went to one of my cousin's birthday, and then this cousin showed up, and I'm like, oh, fuck, But I was like, at that time I had like a positive attitude. So I just like was talking to everyone else, and I was like, hey, how's it going? But, I was talking to other people. And at some point, like, it was me, one of my cousins, that it was his birthday, and his friend, and we were talking. And then my cousin was like, hey, let me go get some drinks. So he like got up and left. And then I saw the other cousin like look at my seat, and he was like, okay, now let me go talk to Mahyar, finally I could talk to him. And so he came up to me, and I'm like, oh, great. So he's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, good, really good and stuff. He's like, what you been up to? And I'm like, oh, I'm like designing shirts and stuff. Like, I learned how to design shirts, like do print on demand, and like what is it, drop shipping and all that stuff, right? And then he was like, oh, good. And somehow the conversation got to a point of like, hey, have you heard of Your Wish Is Your Command? And I was like, no, what is that, right? And he was like, well, have you listened to The Secret? I'm like, yeah, like The Secret, like, it's awesome. Like, I've gotten so much results and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, The Secret is bullshit. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? You know what I mean? So he was one of the people who used it and didn't get result, but he couldn't see that I got all the result, But he was like, yeah, The Secret is bullshit. I'm like, oh my God, what is he talking about? And he was like, man, like, I got this Your Wish Is Your Command thing, it's by this guy named Kevin Trudeau. And, like, I paid 500,000. I don't know how much he paid. He was like, I paid for it, but I'll give it to you for free, And I'm like, I don't want it, He's like, no, please. Like, he started begging me. I'm like, all right, fine, send it, but I can't guarantee if I'll listen to it, And at that time, both my mom and dad were on vacation, so it was just me living in the place. So I remember he sent it to me, and then the next day I was like, let me just listen to one of the audios. Let me see what it's about, And then I started listening. Your Wish Is Your Command, I think it's available on YouTube, and like you could find it easily. Yeah. And I started listening, and Kevin started talking about like, you ever wonder why is it like he started talking about The Secret of like how people listen to it and they don't get results, and therefore they think it's a scam. And I'm like, holy shit, that like I experienced that, And then he went on, like every point he was talking about, I was like, that's the answer to the question I've been asking myself of why is it that I'm getting results and other people are not? Like, for example, one example was in The Secret, they tell you need to set a time limit on what you want out of life, right? You have a goal, set a time of like, by this time, I'll achieve that. But for me, the way I thought about it, I was like, like I was a very lazy person. So I was like, who cares? Like, I'm not going to sit down. Like, I'm not that smart. Like, it's fine. Like, if I get it, I get it. If not, who cares? But I'm not going to sit down. Like, I'm not that smart, right? And it turned out that that was actually the right recipe of like not stressing yourself of like, oh, the date is coming up and I don't have it and all that, So I was doing little things like that that would make it work. But for people who actually apply The Secret step by step, weren't getting result. But for me, I was messing up the messed up recipe on accident. I was getting the right recipe and I was getting the things I wanted. So long story short, I find out that there's a club and that there is an event in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic coming up. This is like, I started listening to audios October 2018, and I found out there's an event of February 2019. And so I was like, I need to go to that event. I don't know how, but Kevin says you could have anything you want. This event costs $2,000. I'm making $0. Let's see how it happens, you know? And one day I was driving to go to a rest, like to Subway to get some sandwich, you know? And on the way, I get into an accident and like a 10-wheeler like hit the back of my car, right? And it was my mom's car and I didn't even have insurance. And I was like, oh, this must be perfect. I don't know what's gonna happen, but you know, everything's gonna go. Like I was that type of person,
All gonna work out.
you know? And it took like 30 minutes for the cop to show up. And the cop that decided to come, he was like this young guy, probably 23, 24. And he was more nervous than me. And so as soon as I sensed that, I just became super confident. And so the guy like forgot to even ask for my insurance or anything. He just asked for my ID, right? And then he asked like, what happened? And he asked the truck driver what happened. And then long story short, I got exactly, I think, $1,996 from that accident. And I was like, oh shit, now I need to come up with $4 more, you know? And I just borrowed that from my mom. And I went to that event. And on the last day of the event, I remember I hadn't made any friends, you know, because I was like super shy. People had talked to me, but you know, I didn't know what to say. So it would become awkward and they would be like, all right, I'll talk to you later. And they would just walk off, you know?
Right. Yep.
But I remember on the last day, I was like, I need to meet someone. Like, even if a guy is making $1,000, $1,500, he can become my mentor because clearly I'm not even making that, you know? And I remember I was like, I don't care, but whoever I become, whoever I see next, I'm just gonna talk to them and ask to become friends, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember it was like the last session of the whole event. It was Sunday, and I was on my way to the last session. And on the way, there's this guy in front of me that was wearing like all white, you know? And I was like, okay, there was the day in the event where everyone wore white. And I didn't even know about that. I was like wearing all black. I went to an all white party with like wearing all black. And they were like, who's this kid, you know? And I was like, maybe he's in the club, you know, because at that resort, there were also people who were just vacationing, you know, not everyone was part of the gym. And so I was like, hey, excuse me, you know, and he turned back. I was like, hey, are you part of Jin? And he was like, yeah, you know. And I was like, oh, nice to meet you. And he started talking to me. He was friendly and all that. And the guy's name was Drake Pearson, right? Which is in the group. And so I remember we sat down and then before the event starts, I remember looking at him and I was like, man, I don't know why, but I feel like you're going to become my mentor, you know? Like I was like that desperate. And he just smiled and he was like, of course, you know? And then at the end of the event, he was like, hey, do you know Cameron? You know, I was like, oh, I've heard his name. You know, it was funny because I was looking for roommates and my cousin, he knew Cameron and he was like, hey, maybe Cameron's looking for roommates, you know? And so I thought Cameron was like this young person. I didn't know he had wife and kids and all that, you know?
Right.
And so I had messaged him. I was like, hey, do you need roommates? And Cameron was like, no, but maybe I could find you some. But then he was like, let's meet at the event, you know? And I had been looking for him all event. I hadn't been able to find him. And then here Drake was like, hey, have you met Cameron? And I'm like, is this guy famous or something? Like, how does he know Cameron, you know? So we went over, he introduced me to Cameron. And then later that day, he invited me to his room, Cameron. And there were a bunch of people. There were like speakers over there, like people who spoke on the stage. And there were level 7 members. And there was Avery that was like a visionary of the club. And I was like, holy shit, like I'm between celebrities, you know? And I'm like freaking out. And then at some point, you know, they started talking about Techno today and they started showing it. And I remember at that time, I didn't know what it was, but I remember having this thought of like, I don't know what this is, but I know if I don't have it, I'm screwed, you know? Like that's how Avery was good at communicating, that someone like me who didn't even understand the language that good, he was able to help me see like, if I don't have this tool, like I'm screwed. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, and then we came back to Houston and I found out that Cameron actually lived 5 minutes from where I live, which was so funny. And so then naturally he invited me and we started meeting. And Max, his son, was at the time like 2.5 year old, and Seneca, I think, was 10 months old or something.
Yeah.
And I remember when Cameron would talk with Max, even at that age, I couldn't even understand. And both Cameron and his 2.5 year old had to dumb themselves down to my level just so I could communicate with them. You know what I mean? Think about it. 2.5 year old talking at a level where I can understand. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, so that's how initially I got introduced to Tegnator, and then I ended up buying it, and you know, the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The rest is history. Here you are. So,
Yeah.
excuse me. So right out the bat, I want to say, thank you for sharing that. That is a remarkable story, and I hope everybody listening, everybody watching, got some nuggets out of that. Hearing where Mayer came from and what he went through and where he is now to the Tesla and the Rolex speaks volumes. So we talk about Technotutor, we talk about how strong, building your vocabulary is, like you were just saying, how Max and Seneca were communicating at a level that you were at, so
Yep.
it's pretty remarkable. And you trying to coming from not knowing English to understanding it, now you're communicating to a level that's that's high, that people have to elevate themselves to get to. So I applaud you for that, and congrats on everything for that. So it's like, we talk a lot about the mind, and most people who do talk about it, they kind of say that, like, it's passe, like, oh yeah, the mind does this, the mind does that. It's like, no, like, we see firsthand how powerful the mind is. When you focus on things, when you think about things. You were telling me a story before we started recording about a buddy of yours, and I'll let you tell this story, and it just kind of speaks to what I was just saying about how powerful the mind is. Go ahead.
So yeah, so me and two of my friends, Brandon and Evan, we went to the mall. I'm assuming that's the story you're talking about, right? Yeah. And we wanted to go to the mall and walk out of our comfort zone and just go talk with random people. And what's funny is, like, this mall we went to, it has we looked at around 57,000 people who visit the mall per day. And you would be surprised, like, these people don't want to talk to anyone. It's like there's people all around them, but it's like they don't want to talk. Like, I would go up to people and I'm like, hey, how's it going? All right. I was like, what's your name? And I'm like raising my hand. And the guy's like, who are you? Like, what do you want? And I'm like, all right, well, have a good one, And it was cool because, like, rejection at this point, like, doesn't affect me. You know what I mean? I got actually happier because I was like, look, I actually went and talked with someone who didn't even want to talk. Like, I got rejected. Like, hell yeah, Because beforehand, I had put in my technical rejection equals success, and rejection equals more money, right? And so Evan, he beforehand, like, he had this fear of, like, talking to people and so forth. And prior days, like a day or two before, he had like some sore throat, but he could talk well, right? But then the morning of the day that we were gonna go to the mall, I called him and he started talking, and he's like, barely any words would come out of his mouth. Like, it's like his voice just like disappeared, most of it, or his tonality, right? He was like sounding like, hey, how's it going? Like, you know what I mean? And
the diaphragm is up. You got to talk from the stomach.
Exactly.
Get that voice out there. Make it heard.
You know what I mean? Hey, how's it going? So, but that's how powerful the mind is like, the fear was so big of not wanting to talk to people that physically his body made sure that he can't talk to people, like, physically, right? And I just thought that was like very fascinating because, I have fear as well, but it wasn't that big because, I'm like, at this point, I trust myself that you put me in any scenario, I could figure it out. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, that was like really cool thing, to see that's how powerful it is. You know what I mean? Like, fear and so forth,
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly. And, like, I'm a very strong proponent about the mind. And the more you think about things, it'll happen, just like you with The Secret and all that kind of stuff. And if you want it, it'll happen. It
Mm-hmm.
will happen. It's just your thinking that makes it so.
Mm-hmm.
So now, with everything that's happened in your life and where you are now, if you had the chance to go back in time and
Mm-hmm.
talk to the younger version of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
what is one thing, just one thing, what was one thing that you would say to yourself?
I got you. So I'll pick up something you said and I'll turn it into that. So you said you get what you want, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually not true. You get what you need, not what you want, right? So because when you want something, that means there's already a lack of it that you want it, right?
True.
So, but if you figure out a way where you turn that want into a need, that's when you actually get it. So for me, let's say getting that Tesla wasn't just a want. I was like, I need that Tesla so that more people listen to me and more people start using Tegna today, because that's going to eventually help create a better world. So my desire for creating a better world was like so big that I was like, I need to have this car just to be able to sell more Tegna today so more people can see these results in their life, right? And it was because of that need that I got that. And I can go through each story of like for example, when I was talking about my school, of like how they put my picture up, all of a sudden I became famous. It wasn't just that I wanted to become more known. I was like, I need to become more known because then more people will talk to me, and it's like I'm forced to learn the language, right? And so learning the language to me was so huge, being able to communicate, that I put myself in a position that I didn't have a way to get out of it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's true, like anything that you could turn from a want to a need, you could have. Doesn't matter how big the goal or the dream is, you see. And I
Mhm.
remember, do you know who Dan Pena is by any
Yep.
chance? Yeah, right. Some people know him, right? They call him
Very in your face kind of a guy.
exactly. And I remember listening to his audiobook. He wrote a book of like how to get your first 100 million or something like that, or getting your first 100 million is the hardest or something like that. And in there, the advice that he gave to his younger self, and he's a guy that, he's a billionaire, and he has, collectively of his net worth and the people he's helped is like over like $1 trillion or something like that, right? And the advice that he gave his younger self, do you know what it was, Rob?
No, I don't.
The the advice he gave his younger self was, I wish I could have dreamed bigger, because at the time he was dreaming of like owning a castle and all that stuff. And he was like, yeah, there's no way that's gonna happen. Like that's big enough. Like there's no way I could even get that. But he was able to get that by the time he was like 40, 50 years old. Now he lives in a castle and like water around it, like all that stuff. And he was like, I wish I had dreamt bigger, because if you dream bigger, then it's like you'll hit all the things that's below it, right? Like let's say if you want a $500 million private jet, then the 100 million is not going to be as much, because you're like, the other one's 400 million, so you could easily even achieve the 100 million one, right? Obviously if you need it, right? So those two, if people apply that, like dreaming bigger. I remember not too long ago, 2 3 years ago, I was dreaming big. I was like, oh my god, I wish I could have a Mercedes. That for me was like the biggest thing. And I ended up getting that by the age of 21. And I'm like, oh fuck, what else can I dream? And I was like, well, what's the fastest car right now? Fastest production car, Tesla. I was like, let me go for that, because the only car at this point that's faster than the car I have, because I have like the sports wheels and like all that stuff. The only faster car is like a car that costs like 2 point something or 4 point something $1 million, right? So you see,
Only
so
a little amount.
just a little bit more, right? Pocket change. But yeah, so that's the advice I would give my younger self. Don't be afraid to dream bigger, because you need it, like you deserve it.
Right.
You meaning you guys. I'm not just talking about myself, but yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah,
Does
yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Heed those words. Everybody out there, just heed those words. Listen, this
if
is
you have techno today, put it in your techno today. I
exactly.
deserve it.
If you want to know more, if you want to hear more of Mayor's story, I got his links in the description below. Feel free to reach out to him if you're curious, want to know more about stuff, or feel free to reach out to myself as well. We'll gladly set you on the right path to get to what you need.
Absolutely.
Okay. We're getting on in time here, Mayor, but I want to touch quickly on the education system. Okay.
Okay.
Um, you touched on it earlier. You were excelling when you were in school,
Hmm.
because it seems like the education system was, for lack of a better term, dumbing down the students in the U.S. Education system. Now, I'm not just saying it's in the U.S. I'm saying it's both U.S. and Canada. It has
Hmm.
changed drastically since I was in school. Okay,
Yeah.
and looking at it from a different perspective, I have two kids, so looking at from that point of view, I'm looking at what kids are learning nowadays, and are they being taught the things to succeed down the road? Long after I'm dead, I want to make sure that my girls are getting the proper education and
Hmm.
understanding things that will help them succeed. We
Hmm.
homeschool them. We started that since the pandemic started in March of 2020, and
Hmm.
we've noticed a huge increase in their comprehension. And they use Tutor as well. So I want to preface that as
Hmm.
well. Um,
Yeah.
their comprehension, their understanding of vocabulary, the fact that they're being kids, they're being inquisitive, they're asking questions, and they're
Hmm.
finding learning fun. I was
Really. Yep.
yesterday. I was doing a lot of yard work outside, and my parents were there helping. And my 6-year-old, she's out there pulling weeds, learning how to garden. She's got a rake, she's got a tiller, manual tiller in her hand, doing all this
That's so cool.
stuff. I'm like, this is amazing. You won't see
Yeah.
kids doing this kind of stuff,
Yeah. What
right?
are the other 6-year-olds doing nowadays? TikTok, like
Exactly.
all that stuff,
Yeah, and
right?
I don't know if you met Kiara in Orlando last August. She
Oh, I
was
did. Yeah.
she was selling bracelets at the time. We
She
didn't know
did
that
sell
she got
all
them
of them, I
down.
think.
She sold
Yeah.
them all. Yeah,
Yep.
I had no idea. Then we come back, she wants to start her own business. Okay, this
Yeah.
at that time she was 8, and like you don't hear 8-year-olds wanting to start their own business at that time. They want to go to the park,
Yeah.
or go on these all these rides. But anyways,
Yeah.
like, I'm seeing how the education system is different compared to homeschooling. But I want to hear your take. Like, what's from what you've seen, where you've come from Iran, and what you've gone through in the school system in Houston. What's your take on today's current education system? Do you think that kids are learning the things that they need to succeed, or are they being told what to learn?
That's a good question. Um, you know John Taylor Gatto, right? So for
Yep.
those who don't know, look up John Taylor Gatto. He was like a New York State Teacher of the Year multiple years. Like he was like the Michael Jordan of teachers, right? And even him, he wrote a book called Dumbing Us Down, where he exposed like what was actually going on in the education system. And I was listening actually to his audio, and he was teaching like a college class, and he had about, I don't know, 100 something students, and he was like, how can I get that number to zero as fast as possible to make sure they're learning what they want instead of just being in my class, right? And he was like, I wasn't able to quite succeed the amount of getting to zero, but I got down to 9 students, right? And he couldn't come up with any more excuse of telling the principal why the kids are not showing up and whatnot, right? But in reality, he was like, one kid wanted to learn how to make comic books and stuff, and he gave him a pass for the rest of the year of like, go study comics, like don't come to this class, go do that. And the kid went on and became a really successful like comic book writer and so on and so forth, right? So again, looking at it, even in Iran, like they teach, like for example, the mathematics in elementary school, it's like higher level and whatnot, but still you're not learning of how to have your own business and whatnot, right? Because the whole point of the school system, like education system as we know it, has been around since the late 1800s, which was like the industrial revolution going on. And so there were more factories, but back then everyone was like farmer, so they're like, well, we need more employees. How can we educate these farmers to become our slave, like work in our factories, right? Or let's call them employee because it sounds nicer, right? And so that's literally what the education system is. It's not to educate you on how to have a better life, it's to educate you on how to run other people's organizations, companies, right? And that diploma or that master's degree or whatever degree that you get, it just shows them of like, all right, this guy only went to 12th grade, let's just give him an easy job because apparently he can handle more. This guy finished master's degree, so apparently he doesn't have a problem with sitting a place, being bored, and wanting to kill himself, but actually doesn't kill himself. So let's just have him manage all these people who hate their life, right? So,
Right.
for lack of a better term. And so, yeah, if you look at it, that's still today, that's the whole point of education system, is to make sure that you don't have any desire of creating your own company or your own business, because that way you'll actually have freedom, right? When you have your own business, because no one's gonna fire you, right?
Right.
And so, like, that's like a whole other thing we could go into for hours, of like all the little things the school's making sure to do to make sure we don't have our own business. And one of it you touched on is the schools tell us what to do and what to learn, instead of how to think and how to learn, right? And when you keep telling someone what to do, they don't develop that critical thinking of, like, when something like COVID happens, they can't think all of a sudden of like, oh, how can I succeed in this situation? Instead, they're like, oh fuck, I need someone to tell me what to do. And their parents don't know, their peers don't know. So guess what? They open up news, because the news is always telling you what to do. Oh, wear mask. Oh no, actually wear 2 masks. Oh, wear 3 masks. Oh, actually stop breathing. Fucking just bury yourself, So it's like, so it's like they don't know what to do. But I was lucky enough to get Techno Tutor at the age of 19, so that by the time that the COVID thing happened, it was like I was 21, right? And I remember, because my 21st birthday, no one wanted to celebrate because they were all scared, fucking like isolating themselves. And I'm there, didn't even have a cake, right? Like put a candle on the toilet paper, like blew that, So, and I was the homeschooling I did with Techno Tutor is, and I use it most of the time myself. Initially, Drake, Cameron, like that's the cool thing about Techno Tutor, is you get the whole community of people, right? Which there's people that pay hundreds of thousands for country clubs, right? Here we have the River Oaks Country Club, which is like 50 to 100K, depending on what membership you want. And that's just initial fee. And then it's like between 400 to 1,000 a month. And that's just to get access to, talk to people. If you want to play golf and stuff, that's like extra, right? And so it's like within what we're doing, it's like you get access to high level people, and you get a tool that you could take what they're saying and actually take it to the knowing part of the brain, where you could apply it for yourself, right? And it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Again, if you want more specific, like reach out to Rob, reach out to me, like we'll tell you more. But by the time COVID happened, I knew exactly what to do. I knew how to build a business. I was like, all right, people are losing their jobs. Let's say even 60% of people losing their job, there's still 40% out there who are fucking buying Lamborghinis and Louis Vuitton and like all that stuff. I'm like, I just need to get them to buy Techno today instead, right? And at some point, government just started giving free money to people, but because people were emotionally not stable, they would just spend it on Amazon, and like, they would get advertised, and they would just give the money back to the same people that were giving them the money. So they created the illusion of, oh, look, we're giving you money, but in reality, you were just giving it back to them, right?
Yeah.
So I went from, again, being in fear, massive fear, going up like 19 years of my life, 20 years of my life, fear, depression, not having any purpose, not knowing what I want to do in my life. My mom attempting, suicide, like killing herself and me when I was younger. Like she attempted 2 times, but gladly she didn't have the vocabulary how to successfully do that, or else I would not be here, right? And so that was another good thing. Like many people here in America suicide because they're seeing other people suicide. But for me, I never saw that. It's like I had the urge to suicide, but I didn't know how to do it. Or else, like if I knew how to, like I'm sure I would have done it based on that life that I had. And so that's how powerful educating yourself is, with the right tools, the right community. And when we say homeschool, it's not really home, because like, for example, your kids, I'm pretty sure they're not even in home most of the time. They're probably in the yard or like playing outside or something. You know what I mean? It's like they're just educating in home probably 3-5 minutes, and then they're like out there playing and stuff, learning, So when we say homeschool, we really mean spend it with the people who actually gave birth to you, because they know you the best. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, yeah.
There we go. One more question. Still pertaining to, I'll use air quotes, homeschooling.
Yep.
There are a lot of parents out there now who see that their kids aren't getting the proper education, but they feel that they are unable to do anything about it, saying like, "Oh, I have to put my kid in school because we have to go to work." I understand that. I understand that. I'm not saying
Hmm.
it's easy, but there are ways around it. And I know a lot of parents that I've spoken to are very nervous about where to begin
Hmm.
when it comes to doing that kind of a thing. So what would you say to any parents who are hesitant about beginning this kind of a journey with their kids?
I would say just get Techno Tutor and then plug in into the perfect parenting group that we have. We literally create a group for parents to know where to start. Like at this point, we're telling you what to do, but you have a tool to take that and start learning how to do it after that yourself. So we're not just telling people what to do, right? So the group, everything is there. Just plug into it. Right? It's literally that simple.
Right.
Right.
And there you have it. It sounds easy. It's not one of those, blank and it's going to happen. It is a
Hmm.
process, and like anything, enjoy the process. Like if you
Hmm.
you want to lose weight, educate yourself on how to lose it properly, and change out lifestyle, and you're going to see the benefits from that. Same thing with
Hmm.
educating yourself. Start with understanding vocabulary, learning what things mean, and next thing you
Hmm.
know, just you're relaying that to other people. You're sharing it to others. You're sharing it to your kids, and you're gonna reap the benefits from that as well.
Yep.
Enjoy the process. And if anybody has any more information, reach out to myself, reach out to Mayor. His links will be in the description below. And yeah, go from there. Start yourself off on another journey, and set yourself up for success in the future, especially in today's day and age.
Hmm.
We need that support. We all have to come together, support one
Hmm.
another, and create a new world, essentially, pretty much,
Exactly.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Mayor, thank you very much, man. I appreciate you coming on and telling me about your Tesla and showing me your Rolex, all that kind of stuff. It's an inspiration not just for myself, and I'm sure it's inspirations for many other people who are listening and watching out there. So much appreciated, good sir.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
No problem. So that's it for this episode of Spehar Initiative. I know it's been a while, but here we are. This is a good one. I enjoyed this one. It's a long time coming. We've been planning this for a few weeks, but here
Mhm.
it is. So one more time, Mayor, thank you very much. Everybody out there, click the links below to reach out to us. And until next time, we'll see you online. Peace.
See ya. Bye.